right? Like, why not leverage those experiences and have those conversations? I think a lot of times folks are we're watching and we're on the sidelines and we don't think we have a space to jump in, but we're talking amongst each other. This is SPD to SPD. Speak up.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now, turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
This week on Beyond Clean, we're speaking with Alessandra Nicholson, Sterile Processing Operations Manager at UMass Memorial Healthcare. Hank, we're going to be talking about organization. And, this is not always an easy thing for folks to do. I can tell you there are times when I'm extremely organized, times when I'm less organized. A lot of times it's related to how much stress and pressure I'm under. Things tend to slip when the responsibilities pile and I feel like I'm behind. That's when the organization starts to go because I feel disorganized. And so we're going to put it in this context for this season around sterile storage and really highlight why it's so important to be organized for us to function well as team members, especially, I know we're not going to dive too far into this, but on different shifts as well.
Yeah, and we're not all obsessive compulsive, right, when we step into that role, but there's still a huge need to be able to find what you need when you need it quickly in that sterile storage area. So critically important topic, and I'm really excited to present some concrete takeaways in this episode for folks to go back in and actually make a change to improve their sterile storage. And it's so easy for those things to get out of hand, even if you had it good, 6 months ago or 6 years ago. If you're not keeping an eye on it, it's very easy for it to slide back in time. So I really want to flesh out, those tips to not only get it fixed, but to keep it that way.
All right. Well, get ready for an easy listening episode because Alessandra has all the cool podcasting gear and has a podcast herself. So we'll be right back after a short break. Stay with us. I'm Justin Poulin.
And I'm Hank Walsh.
From the 17 studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Joining us now is Alessandra Nicholson, Sterile Processing Operations Manager at UMass Memorial Healthcare. And Alessandra, I'm excited to continue this discussion about sterile storage, but in a certain aspect or niche in a way is just how do we organize this disaster, or I should say this sometimes disaster. And, everything's always kind of moving around. So even if you organize it once, it doesn't mean it stays that way. And so this whole conversation is very much going to be, let's get our house in order. So welcome to the show and very excited to have you on today.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so excited to be on today. And as an operations manager, let me correct you first by saying there are no disasters, only opportunities for improvement.
I love it. That's the beauty of being the podcast guy who's not leading a department. I get to say disaster, but I've been in a lot of different departments. So I want to kind of tee this up a little bit without diving right into the conversation and just get you to tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe start by telling us what is your most favorite thing about sterile processing.
My most favorite thing about sterile processing is being able to be a bridge between competent care and competent technicians. So being able to produce techs that can be on the floor, that can be independent, they can think through problems, creates an environment where you have the patient at its most safest point. You can't be everywhere at all times, but I can create some mini-me's, some mini experts that can be everywhere at any time. So anytime that I can duplicate myself or create another technician, that's my favorite thing.
That's such a constant theme on this show. There's a leadership element to what you just said, right? I'm not trying to hold the organization or the department hostage by being the end all be all. I want more and more people to be able to do what I can do so that we all thrive. And if that means they move on to another organization or get promoted, that's a good thing for us and the industry. So I know that's not exactly what you said, but I heard it loud and clear in what you said.
That is 100% what I'm saying. I try to remind my technicians every day that they are individuals in and of themselves. Most of the positions that I've worked in, the technicians have been certified. So I will constantly remind them in the language that you are certified just like me, to put us on that same playing field so that they are empowered to do exactly what I'm doing, which is trying to keep those patients safe. And you never know where you may end up in a hospital. A technician flying out of my coop doesn't mean that I've lost. That could be my saving grace somewhere else. So we want competent techs everywhere.
Amen.
Right.
The only thing I was going to ask is, you just said, if they fly the coop, where have you been and where have you worked? What kind of roles have you held and what kind of mentorship have you had yourself?
Oh, yes. So I started in a small hospital in a rural area in Southern Illinois and worked for one of the only hospital systems in the area. So while it was rural, I had the experience of being the big fish in the small pond. So we did, we had every service line, and that allowed me to really get some strong foundation as a technician. We didn't have the biggest caseload, but we were the trauma, we were the transplant, we were the spine center, we were everything. So that gave me an opportunity to learn every area, not just being pigeonholed, which is something I see in the larger spaces. So I am ever grateful for that experience. We also were materials management as well. So, and that seems to be a dying art in sterile processing, maybe by design, but I don't know. There might be some information we lose in that process, but we were materials and central service. So I learned about all the products, the trachs, GU boxes, crash carts, things that some sterile processing techs don't get to see these days. So that was a really great experience. And I worked with them for 5 years. And then I bounced out to the Bay Area as a travel tech. Worked with Kaiser and had a totally different experience, going from a facility that maybe did 30 cases a day to a facility that was doing 70 easy with no add-ons was another experience. So I got an opportunity to stretch myself, to kind of fill the gaps in ways that I never would have imagined as a travel tech. And then from there, it was all about how far can I take this? How much can I expand myself? So I reached into being a supervisor with them, became a manager with them, and from there have expanded out across the Bay Area. And now I'm on the East Coast, thanks to the pandemic shift. But I'm also just, again, every experience has been a little different.
Pandemic shift.
Right?
Seriously, you got to trademark that. That was good.
It was definitely a shuffle. So. But
now, you're involved in a lot of other extracurricular stuff too, and I want to make sure to give you a chance up front so we don't forget about it.
Right,
but let folks know in a day. Yeah, you won't forget about it, but maybe I'll forget about bringing it up. But let folks know what else you're in with, right? Like that experience and background in the department is so critical, obviously, for bringing the kinds of topics forward that we're going to on this episode. But you're much deeper than just a lot of experience, so share with folks what else that you're doing these days.
Absolutely. So again, with that pandemic shuffle, we've kind of stretched ourselves one more time. So I've really branched out into social media, have become really active in LinkedIn, a lot of sterile processing Facebook groups. And in the beginning, just kind of wanted to try to be a manager to more people. So being able to jump in and answer questions for techs that are just kind of out there and need some support. And that led to being asked to join a podcast. So now I'm working with Denard Esnard on the process. We have that show every Wednesday night at 7. And that has been just a few months in pandemic life, but it has altered my entire experience and just the way that I carry myself as a manager. You know, being able to put out content, but also to see that reverberated, to hear people, you know, quote you, you know, it's different. So it's really made me even more push myself to be excellent at all things all the time. I want, you know, to be realistic. We want to be authentic. I'm not, you know, there's no such thing as the Clark Kent superhero on this one, but I want them to see that it is possible to carry yourself with a sense of excellence in this field without being berated to do so.
Great. Yeah. So I'll say one more thing about your social media presence is I have noticed just in all the Beyond Clean events and everything else, like if there's a live stream going on, chances are high your name's going to be popping up somewhere in the comment section. Just give it a couple of minutes. It's like, oh yeah, there she is. Now we can get rolling.
I'm active. I am active.
It's good.
Right? Like, why not leverage those experiences and have those conversations? I think a lot of times folks are we're watching and we're on the sidelines and we don't think we have a space to jump in, but we're talking amongst each other. This is SPD to SPD. Speak up.
Right. So I would love to just talk about that the entire episode, but I got to get to sterile storage. So let's do a not smooth segue here into sterile storage and just say the topic of this episode is all about organizing sterile storage. Why is that so important? Like Justin kind of alluded to it, you know, like he threw out that D word, disaster, and you're like, no, hold up. That's not what it is, right? But, you know, why is it so critical that when you go into that space, you can find what you're looking for quickly?
I mean, I'm going to say the simple thing. The patient needs it, right? So you're going in there and you're looking for it because someone asked you for it. And if someone asked you for it, it's because the patient is waiting for it. The only real difference in that scenario is how much pressure. So how quickly do they need it? And that's a space where we can for sure find out how well we've organized that space, what kind of processes we put in place, and how our folks feel about that organization. Because if there's no buy-in there, it won't hold. So it's really about being able to go in there and get what that patient needs in a timely fashion.
That buy-in piece, so critical, because there are going to be some folks listening to this show who they walk away inspired and like, okay, yeah, so I got some tips. I'm going to go back. I'm going to organize. I'm going to go in over the weekend and I'm just going to bless my team and go in there and organize it all. And then
weekend warriors.
Yeah. So then what happens, you know, talk us through, because I know you probably experienced this. The staff walks in on Monday morning and they walk into a completely different sterile storage area that has been organized on their behalf, but not necessarily with their buy-in. What happens next, right? Like, what's that response?
The decibels and the chatter will increase. So there will definitely be feedback, and whether or not you get it up front or you get it through back channels, there will be feedback. You know, some teams are more vocal, so they will walk in and tell you right away what happened. No, there's no way you can put the Zimmer Next Gen on this side when everything else is on the other side. They will quickly pick it up, and they will nitpick it. But you also have teams that will spend their time and kind of go through it and see what issues they're finding, and they may or may not bring those to you immediately. So that's one of those spaces where it is really critical to have strong relationships with your team, not just in your shift huddles, but you know, individual relationships, because they will come to you and say, okay, hey, I know you were trying, but,
yeah, thanks, but, no thanks. Or at least
thanks,
not the way. Yeah.
Right. And we have to be careful with that too, because a lot of times those weekend warriors are volunteers. So yes, they're working on overtime, but it's typically staff members that will jump ahead and take the lead on doing those big organizational projects. So you don't want to have an environment where someone has really gone above and beyond out of their way to try to put something together for the team. And then the first experience they have of the team meeting it is just complete dismay. Put that collaboration together. It doesn't have to be a months-long project. You can really hash this out in huddles if you want. But I would say just kind of as a manager, just kind of be careful of your resources and your staff in that space.
Before we get into this question about preference, right? Because you kind of alluded to it, right? If these are volunteers, they're coming in on the weekend, and especially if it's at the technician level, like they're walking in and they got an idea of what it means to be organized, but kind of start us at the beginning. And can you define like some things that you would qualify something objectively as being organized in sterile storage? Like, is there a standard that we're working off of?
Kind of like a general template. Mm-hmm. I would say some general templates would be putting like things with likes, putting services with services. Those are usually no-brainers, and they will typically allow you to get the majority of the items that are going to be pulled from the same type of procedure cards in the same general vicinity. So you don't have a technician walking from one end of sterile storage to grab a drill and then the other side to grab the battery, right? So like things with likes, vendors with vendors, right? So I don't want to see, Depew mixed in with NextGen, mixed in, with my Stryker kits. So those are some kind of low hanging fruit or just kind of general ideas that can help out. And then your sterile storage may or may not be in one central location. So that's something else to think about. If you've got sterile storage in OR suites that are away from sterile processing, that may influence heavily where you place certain items. There may be things that they call for frequently that I should leave right next to their rooms rather than having it be separated in the sterile processing department.
Okay. Yeah. Now slow down because you're getting into some good stuff there and I don't want to miss that. But I want to go back to that preference part. So you answered my question. There is a level of objective organization, right? It's not that if you put, 10 technicians in a room, they're all going to come to 10 different ways to organize this well, right? There's something out there. Now, it may look different from department to department, so it's not all cookie cutter, like everyone's going to do the exact same thing, but it's not totally up to how you feel it should look in here. So how do you balance that as a leader, as a technician, in giving your personal feedback, right? Because you mentioned that you want buy-in, but do we just listen to all the buy-in that we get and say, okay, if it's buy-in and if it's feedback, it must be good, so I'm going to do it? Or how do we balance that and measure that from both sides of that equation?
Right. So sometimes in sterile processing, it can be participation awards for everyone. There does have to be, some decision made, some direction in which we all choose to follow. But I think one way to get some general consensus about that is to make it focus on the process. So coming at it from a perspective of, if it's case pulling, what's the most efficient way to pull the cases? If it's, if it's just a general sterile storage, maybe you're trying to get organized for clinics. That may help you decide where certain things go. In my experience, our clinic instruments are going to be separated from our OR instruments. So that's kind of one check off the list of where does that go? Well, it's going to be opposite side of the room from this stuff. Right. So, that can help you out. But in general, I would say sticking close to the process. When are you going to get those items? Why are you going to get those items? How often are you going to have to go get those items? Asking those kind of questions and really looking at it from an efficiency standpoint may help you do some tiebreakers when one person really feels like this thing should go here and the other person is saying, no, this is the reasons why.
And that's hard, right? Because you want to build ownership into your staff. That's so critical, that empowerment factor. You want people to feel like it is your department, because it is. It's not just feeling like that, it really is their department. But you also have to manage all that complexity of those opinions that comes in to it. So that's a great answer. That process answer is one we can all agree with. We want it to be easy for all of us, no matter who it is that's going in there to find the tray. We all need to be able to find it quickly and efficiently, like you said. So before we leave that people part of this equation and that preference, I want to kind of throw a curveball at you, just from your opinion, right? How much of our differences around creating this organized sterile storage or even maintaining sterile storage or not maintaining it, in your opinion, how much of that has to do with just our personal home lives, how we live in our cars, in our bedrooms? If you were to look at my truck any day of the week, it's always a disaster in there, right? But then I come in to sterile processing and I'm just the T's crossed, the I's dotted. I don't want to see like one thing out of place. Like, is that a personal thing that we bring into work with us? Or can they turn that off and then change that perspective, depending on what the circumstance is?
Absolutely. That is such an interesting question. And it's got me thinking about myself because, yes, if you were to take my car as an example, you would not, because you wouldn't imagine the way that my sterile storage looks.
Hey, so that's why we're friends. Okay, great.
But again, yeah, like you said, you cross that red line and it's like, okay, yeah.
Right.
I need it to be the way that it needs to be. And I pride myself on clean and organized sterile processing departments, especially for my teams, because it just feels better when you come into a space and it's organized and it's cleanly versus everything being everywhere or towels being all over the place. It lifts a little something off of you. And there's already so much pressure on us. So any little thing you can do is a good thing.
You want to know why? It goes back to your servant leadership. It has everything to do with the fact that it's a shared space. The car is a personal space that you're willing to sacrifice, not being organized so that you can attend to other people and other things in your life. I'm so like, that's my hunch, but I'm very similar. Like my office is a disaster, a complete disaster. But then, I'm constantly picking up after the kids. They leave stuff out. I make sure the dishes keep moving. I do the laundry. I do grocery shopping for the family. Like I do all these other things to help keep the wheels turning, and yet my office, I get to it maybe once a year. Mm-hmm. There are shipping boxes that pile up in here and it's a nightmare. It's my disaster. But I think that has a lot to do with it. I think, if you're a leader, you know that you can't lead a team in the midst of chaos, right? You can manage yourself, but you can't help others fulfill what they can achieve, especially as a team when you're not setting them up for success. I think you're just both others focused.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for that. That was very enlightening. And I agree 100%. It makes a difference. And you want the technicians to be in their happiest possible environment. It's not, romper room. We're not having, fun all the time, but we can do things to make it a little easier for ourselves. This is where our playing music comes from, and, not wanting to be the manager that takes away all the headphones. I know you need it, especially in decontam, but yeah, I want to prioritize their well-being as much as I possibly can. So that's good.
I had to give you kudos for the throwback to Romper Room, by the way. Like, super.
I could tell you like that, Justin.
You for that. Yeah, you saw my face light up. I know nobody listening to this podcast can see, but we do have video on when we record this. And yes, my face, Hank knew that was coming.
Like, here it comes. He's gearing up.
Oh, goodness. But yeah, to answer that question of how much of it is us versus how much of it is the individual, it's kind of nature versus nurture kind of conversation. I mean, it is a mix of both, and you have to manage both. And that's not just for us as leadership. That's for staff members as well. They have to contend with each other's behavior. There's going to be technicians that we all know if that person was here, everything is clean and organized. And then there's others of us that create opportunities of improvement for everyone else. So, it really is a space where it's about doing your part, because 100%, all of those personality types will be frustrated if they cannot find that tray. And that's what I try to remind the staff of, is this is a shared experience of joy and misery. If you take it upon yourself not to put the thing back where it goes, you may be the one that comes back here in a couple of days and can't find it.
I love that shared experience piece. And I'm going to kind of go back to the weekend warrior types that want to come in and clean it up. And let's say they did get the buy-in and everybody, got to chime in, and, that really an effective change management process is going on there operationally. It's all set up for success. But then, I think a lot of times, and this is what happens to me when I go to clean my office once a year. I walk in and I finally say to myself, enough is enough, Justin. This place is a disaster. What am I going to do about it? And the first thing is like, well, where do I start? I have like mail here that I probably should have responded to 6 months ago, or I have, all of this. And I think that's, sometimes that first step is by far the most difficult, because that once you're in, you're in. You can't just do a little bit, right? You've got to go for it now once you take that first step. So how do people get started? Where should they start? And why should they start in that particular area to get things going and get the ball moving?
Assuming that, like you said, we've all discussed it. We've got an outline. We've got a plan. I think for me, my logical mind goes to services, just because it's going to make it the easiest for me to put like things with like, to put vendors with vendors. If I'm moving by service line, I've not worked in an environment where that wasn't helpful. So I kind of want to stretch myself and think if there's any time that I really would kind of cross that. But after you kind of lay that out as a framework, I think some of the nuances or some of the kind of tricky, sticky points will show themselves, especially as you work the process. So, if you're coming in on the weekend and you're doing that heavy lifting of organizing, of labeling, God help you if you're barcoding, my friends, you're miracle workers. It's not done. So don't be married to that end product when you walk out the door on Saturday night. That's going to change, and you need to be prepared for that and be kind of asking the questions yourself. So it's a driver for you as you come in and they're working through these processes, and you hear folks that are, they're a little frustrated because they can't find the thing. Use it as an opportunity to just refine that process.
So where in the process would you tackle the peel packs? How far down the road?
What peel packs? We don't.
They're not in sterile storage.
Yeah.
They're up in the OR. That's for them to take care of. That's right.
Yeah. I think, again, this one I have two answers for, because this is going to kind of depend on your layout. I've been in spaces where peel packs were in their own little heaven, and they maybe they were on a wall or they were in some sterile cubby somewhere, and they really were their own entity. So I would use the same basic framework, either service line, or sometimes you see peel packs laid out by usage. So I may have just those items that they're constantly calling for. Maybe those Adsons, those Mayo scissors, those towel clamps are in an area where I can easily grab them. And then maybe the rest of those items are listed by services. So I would play around with that. If you are a weekend warrior and you're really doing your entire sterile storage, I would put peel packs to the back of my mind and start with the sets.
So, man, we don't have time for me to debate that topic, but that's a topic that I want to talk about some more sometime. Maybe on your show. Maybe I can come back.
All right.
How about we turn it into a conference?
There you go.
I think we could have a peel pack conference, I swear.
It's huge. No, that's such a hot topic, like a real hot topic, right? Like we kind of throw that phrase around a lot, but like peel packs are so critical, and they're dependent on so much by the OR, but they're such like a headache sometimes on the sterile processing side, for just completing, but then, for storing and organizing. But let's not go down that rabbit trail. I'm going to continue. I got to stay focused here. So we're all about actionable advice and tips on the show. Like we want folks to be able to listen to it, get inspired, get challenged, but at the end of the day, be able to walk away with something they actually can do, right? To improve their department, to keep their patients safer. And one of those, like you're laying out, some big concepts about the service lines, about the flow, all that is just so important, right? But is there anything small that you've kind of seen through your career, it just made like that sterile storage room pop, or just made it that much easier to get to those trays, right? Like anything like that just kind of jump out that you would say, yeah, like this is something maybe on Monday morning you can go in and consider doing.
I've seen a few things that have struck me that have made it a little easier for me to navigate, and especially coming into a new space. I think that really shows you how user-friendly your sterile storage is. If you drop somebody off over there, can they navigate?
Right, right.
That's one way to find out if it's efficient and effective. So some of those things I've seen are just kind of general lists of what's in that area. So you may do that, maybe the top 20 things or the top 20 types of things or that are in that area. just some general kits that will kind of guide you. So I know, okay, all the GYN is up in this area because I see, C-section trays and I see histo trays on this list over here. My lap instruments and scopes are listed here. So that kind of can give me a quick guide to be able to just go down that row and kind of have a general expectation of what I can see there. Other things that I've seen are color coding mechanisms. My favorite one was at UMass, was done by a CST that we had as an ortho supervisor, and she color coded our consignment area. And so that was a game changer. We do a hefty amount of totals procedures. Of course, as maybe most surgeons haven't figured out yet, that we shouldn't carry every line of everything that was ever made, but I digress. So we had a lot of vendors, and she took the time to not only, barcode and label all those items, but to say, okay, Zimmer is purple, DePuy is pink. And that just quick guide allows you to look up and navigate yourself like, okay, I'm going for the Zimmer kit. I'm going to the left. So those were some simple things that I felt like just added some a touch of user friendliness to it.
Yeah, no, that's great.
We got to connect you with Gary Bassi.
Yeah, right. And it's funny, like we're recording this the week of Surgical Tech Week, right?
Shout out.
I love that it was a surgical tech, right, that brought that innovation and insight and improvement to our department. And I just want to, stop there because we give ourselves a lot of love, which we deserve a lot of love, right? But there is great ideas out there across the perioperative service line that can be brought into sterile processing from the outside and help us do our jobs better. So I really appreciate you sharing that story. And I want to give some props to those surgical techs out there. We love you guys.
Absolutely.
So thanks.
We love you. And they come from all different backgrounds. We had the benefit of having a Navy CST with us, and that was a game changer for us. It really allowed us to take a lot of excuses out of our vocabulary.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a nice way to say that.
Quickly.
So to wrap us up here, I know we have talked about like a lot of great insight and perspective around this piece, but it wouldn't be fair to anyone if we left off this last question on, once you get it the way that you want it, how do you keep it that way, right? Like once you fixed it, quote unquote, what would you advise folks to kind of consider in that maintenance process, from shift to shift? And then from day to day, and of course, like from month to month, so you don't wake up in 12 months and it's even worse than it was when you organized it last year.
Absolutely. So I would say be intentional about holding that space. And that may look like some preventative maintenance. Maybe you come up with a schedule in which you go through and you do a deep organization or a deep cleaning. If you have a tracking system, I would highly recommend doing some regular scanning of your sterile storage just to give yourself some sense of peace. It also gives you great data, on things that you're not moving or how often you are using things as well. But I would build in just some preventative maintenance in that area. And then, of course, from a people perspective, you have to manage those expectations. So if you've got shift leads or you have shift supervisors, having folks that are kind of driving home the need to put things in the right place, to scan if you're doing scanning, and just kind of make that a part of your daily routine that we're driving those points home. We do a lot of complex work, but we do it all the time. And sometimes I find if we can just focus on a few key little pieces, it really helps us to stay focused. So, making sure we put items in the right place, making sure we're checking drain filters, those kind of things just kind of jog our memory to do the right thing all the time.
Alessandra, this went super fast and your voice is easy to listen to. So I'm not surprised that you have your own podcast. And I think everybody will notice that you have really good equipment too, because you're coming through wonderfully. Yeah, crystal clear. But what's really coming through is some really salient points, some solid takeaways. Of course, a shout out to Romper Room. And I think we got a term that you could trademark too. What was it? The pandemic
shift. Pandemic shift.
The pandemic shift. I mean, there's definitely some takeaways for the department, but there's also some serious entertainment takeaways from this episode. So you did a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I definitely, I want to leave you guys with one little story from my experience on the road, if you will, about why it is so important to have some process. Don't ignore your sterile storage, guys. It does need to be effective. It does need to be efficient. We've all gotten the call for a kit that we could not find. And that can go from just a frustrating experience of having everybody pulled off the floor and looking for a thing and finding it somewhere it shouldn't be, or in some places finding it exactly where it was supposed to be. But it can quickly shift into an emergency situation. And I have never felt pressure like I felt pressure a day that we had a patient that needed a broken screw removal tray. They were bleeding out and they couldn't stop because they couldn't get past that screw. And we couldn't find that kit. We had the whole department. We had multiple people looking for it and we just simply could not find it. We checked the barcode. We checked the scan. Last location we went through to see what was it pulled with. Where could it have been put in the wrong container? Never found that kit. A blessed surgeon was able to maneuver and make away with other equipment. Thank God, patient was safe and sound. But that shift report was the first shift report that my voice shaked when I talked to my team of just never again. We can't allow this to happen. I don't care what we need to do, but we will do something to make sure that never again do we have that call and we can't find. And I'm not going to be, I tell my patients or my staff, if it's something that you're not willing to go to the bedside and explain to the patient, I don't want to hear it. I'm not willing to go to that bedside and tell that family that I lost a life because I couldn't find the kit because we put it somewhere that it didn't belong. It's just not a good enough excuse. So we always want to do our very best, our very best.
It's been a while since we talked to Nestor Hernandez, but that's one heck of a why, Alessandra. Way to close. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you guys for having me.
That was Alessandra Nicholson, Sterile Processing Operations Manager at UMass Memorial Healthcare. And Hank, I had a lot of fun with this conversation today. And I know I used the term disaster, and I love the way that she repositioned that. But
she wasn't going to have it, Justin. She was not going to let that fly.
Yeah, good for her. You know, maybe there's a little sensationalism to disaster, but I will tell you, my office is absolutely a disaster, 10 to 11 months out of the year. And I know it needs cleaned up. And, you mentioned the truck and what that looks like. And,
right.
In a lot of ways, it's our home. You spend more time at work than you really do awake in your own home environment. And
right.
Maybe that's another reason it's easy to leave my office in this state. Actually, no, this is my workplace and my home. But either way, what I'm really getting at is I think for us to be able to work well as teams in shared spaces, there has to be kind of a respect for the purpose of that space and maintaining it amongst each other. But it's just like my office. It's just like your truck. It can get back to that state really easily. One busy day, 1 month of just consistently being understaffed and feeling like you're always scrambling. And the next thing you know, here we are. So I do want to give a shout out to those weekend warriors, under the right guidance to be able to get
right.
that change management engagement that make this happen. And then a lot of the advice that she gave us at the end about making it sustainable, like everybody has to stay mindful on those key points.
And, some of it is a team dynamic balance. Like we fleshed that out a lot, but if you walk into some area, like if you walk into your office, you can probably find 95% of everything that you need to find. Like, you know where it is. It may be not like clean and organized, but you can track it down because you put it there. But if someone else walks in that office and tries to find the same thing, there's no hope. And that's a critical part of the sterile storage is it's not just one person. It's not the person who put the tray on the wrong shelf because they were rushed. They're not going to be the one that needs to find that tray. It's going to be someone else. So we don't have that flexibility. We don't have that liberty to be sloppy in sterile processing. And I thought that she did a fantastic job highlighting that. Even in the close, these are not just preferences that we want it to look pretty. This is really a life and death kind of scenario. It must be organized. It must be easy to find. And yeah, like this is just a fantastic interview to highlight that.
Totally agree, Hank. And that's going to do it for this week's show. But as a reminder, you can help support Beyond Clean by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts, as well as Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or just search for Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast application. We also have bonus content for you on certain episodes. All you got to do is download our smartphone app for iPhone and Android. And while you're doing so, why don't you give us a rating and a review? Your feedback is important to the show. If you've got any topics that you'd like us to cover, maybe you got a guest that you think would be great to listen to on a future episode, just send an email to info@beyondclean.net. On behalf of Hank and myself, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean.